Welcome in to a Thursday edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Tyler Yaremchuk, Carter Hutton with you as always. And as always, we're streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, looking for your inbox questions. We are also a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Big shout out to Irf and Colby for covering for us yesterday while Hutz and I traveled back from our little staff bonding trip. That was just the two of us.
That's it. Hey, we went from meeting each other outside the hotel, being like, hey, what's up, man? Nice to meet you in person, to hugging as the Jays hit a dinger to go to the World Series. So things happen quick in our relationship. But what a trip, buddy. It was good getting to see you and catch some great sporting events while we were there in Toronto.
Yeah, it was a total blast. Drove some race cars with our friends at Hyundai and Genesis as well. So a totally good time in Toronto, but back to talking hockey. And at least I'm home. You're back on the road again. But we're going to be joined by Steve Peters for our big segment later on today. We're going to kind of go through some new coaches and new spots and early returns for those situations. But let's kick off the show with, listen, it's something that Irf and Kolb talked about yesterday, but I still think they are the story of the NHL, and it's the New Jersey Devils. Devilishly good, a sixth straight win after losing their first game of the season. They're now up to 6-1, and we were in the building as they beat the Leafs the other night. And I mean, the goal scoring is impressive for this Devils team. They controlled the pace of that hockey game. I think it's maybe more of a comment that the Leafs didn't look good. But then you go back to last night, and again, the Devils just kind of handedly taking care of Minnesota with a 4-1 victory. This team is really good.
Really good. Really good. And you know, on a team on a back-to-back, right, I've always found that you start on time early, right? You're already in the flow of things. You know, you get to go home. Young guy getting the start, Nico Dawes. He's been in tough experiences, you know, games. He made a couple key saves, but the shots were like 18-4 at one point. Like they had this ice tilted against the Minnesota Wild. And what I noticed even in that Toronto game firsthand is just how their offense creates. And it felt like their speed and quickness in the offensive zone, how they move the puck, how they cycle, was too much for the Leafs. Big decor, you know, some of these bigger bodies, they tried to end up and have that ground and pound game. It just wasn't working. And this is all without Jacob Markstrom, right? They lose him. Jake Allen. This is why you signed Jake Allen to that deal. This is why he's a veteran guy. And Ty had a chance to kind of analyze his game versus Stolar's game with you. He just doesn't really hurt himself. He's always in position. His game is simple. And I think it starts to stem into other guys' game around you, right? The simplicity, his demeanor. And this is a really good team. And they're getting goal scoring from different pieces. You know, Stefan Nason getting back in the lineup last night is a big piece for this lineup, what his success he's had last year. And then Brendan Dillon scores 2 games in a row. You know, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, those guys are going to get your points. But now when you start getting scoring down your lineup and from odd guys, it makes your team very dangerous. And I think last night was a great example of that for the Devils.
I want to talk a bit more about their depth, but I want to share an observation from our viewing experience of Devils Leafs. Obviously, neither of us had a rooting interest in either of those teams, but it was very funny sitting next to you. The only time you made noise was when there was a nice save, and you can tell the goalie union's still strong in you. You'd be like, yeah, good save.
Yeah, it's there. And, you know, I guess I'm just so used to analyzing defensive zones and structure and where the threat is coming from. And I think Jake was, you know, it's one of those things where it's so boring at times. There's such an art to that. And it's so hard to do now in the new NHL where players are so talented and the game travels so east-west. And the other side of it is where a lot of these younger guys aren't as good defensively. So there's higher chances where when I watch the Stolarz clip, and not necessarily that Stolarz was bad in that game, New Jersey just creates so many chances and opens the ice up. You start to stretch your game out and try to play outside your posts. And I think for the Devils, that's reassuring on the defensive end. And you're seeing it firsthand. They're not really giving up a lot. It's predictable hockey in the decor. And you're seeing it firsthand how they're banking points and finding ways to win hockey games, Ty.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the depth here really quick because the offense has been very noticeable for the Devils. Like they're top 10 in scoring chances generated at 5-on-5. They're top 5 in goals at 5-on-5. And they've had 7 different players. They have 7 different players who have 2 or more even strength goals on the year. And I kind of went and looked through a bunch of the other good offensive teams to start the season. None of them had more than 5. A team like the Golden Knights only had 3. Like the fact that you can look up and down this lineup and find guys who are contributing or have contributed multiple times to the 5-on-5 scoring, like that's kind of the reason to believe that this might be sustainable. They're not going to win 6 out of every 7. There's going to be a tough stretch here and there. And I know a lot of people had the Devils as a playoff team as well, but when you start to compare them now to some other teams in the Eastern Conference and with some other teams who've had slow starts, it's like, okay, they might be closer to like a 1 seed territory than where a lot of people had them maybe like 6-7 seed territory.
Yeah, I do believe in that. I think there's also the maturity of this lineup and guys being in, Nico Hischier now is at a point where he is a veteran player, right? It kind of comes at you quick, right? He's a guy that was a younger player. He fills a lot of minutes. He does a great job. And Jack Hughes, obviously the superstar he is. Now it comes down to health for these guys, right? In my mind, as I look back on the last few seasons, obviously Jack Hughes being healthy, what he can produce. We got to see him score a hat trick the other night firsthand, but just what he creates and how much attention he draws in a lineup, then all of a sudden you start getting better matchups in other areas because of what Jack Hughes brings to the table. Without him out, you can scatter that a bit, which is important for a team when you're talking about slotting and you're talking about minutes. Then the other factor for me in this lineup is on their decor with Dougie Hamilton staying healthy as well, right? He is still a big piece that can eat up a lot of minutes, spread it out. They have a big back end in that sense. So I think for him being healthy as we move on for this Devils team is going to be a big example of how they can maintain this Metro Division lead.
Let's keep cruising along. One headline that popped up over the last 24 hours here was the Nashville Predators making the decision to send Brady Martin, their fifth overall pick from this last year, back to the OHL. And this kind of story pops up every year. We saw it in Vancouver with a guy like Braeden Cootes, who, a high-end prospect comes in, impresses everybody in camp, and sort of out of nowhere ends up cracking the big club. And then we see this every year. We saw it last year with Jet Luchenko in Philly, where it's a couple of games and all of a sudden, it's not the preseason anymore. You're playing against full NHL rosters and they don't look as noticeable. And the coach doesn't want to play them in big moments. Like you see the time on ice, 11:25 per game here. And it kind of raises the question to me, Huts, like, what's more valuable to these prospects? Because you even look at a guy like Luchenko, who went down, and then even this year, 4 games, no points. Like he's arguably not even ready this season yet. Is there value in giving these guys the experience because they, quote, earn it in camp? Or is it better off to just go into camp with a legit plan like the Islanders had with Cal Ritchie, where it's like, we do not care how good you look. You are going to play at a lower level and play 22 minutes a night.
Yeah, I think there's value. Honestly, I do. Just because of the mental aspect, if you do start to struggle at the NHL level, there's no hiding, right? And I talked about this a little bit in person with you, like where I took a lot of my struggles when I was younger in the American Hockey League when there was 500 fans at a game and I could hide from national TV and 6 different angles of a bad goal going in and not have to open up my social media and be absolutely hammered by people because you're not playing well. So I think for these younger players to get that experience, to go through a full training camp and get a breath of like, hey, this is the NHL. And I read a quote from Brady Martin just talking about how there's no shifts to catch your breath. And it's a really good point about the NHL, how if you take a shift off or a moment off, somebody makes you pay. And I think you really get exposed to that and what goes into being prepared to play in the NHL. But that being said, he scored 2 goals in the preseason against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, he gave himself a good chance to make this team. But then as you start to look as him being a top 6 player, if he's not going to be a top 6 player, you don't want him to alter his role completely to be this checker. And then he loses all that credibility because he's not handling the puck. So get him in the minors or get him back to junior, so he can grow his game and continually dominate. And then all of a sudden, when he starts to make that jump, he's grown a bit and he has that experience hanging over him from the NHL as he moves forward. He's a player we're going to see shortly in NHL, but I think this is the right move.
Yes, our boy Steven Ellis is in the YouTube chat. He just dropped in a comment. Brady Martin's going to be excellent, but he needs time. I also think these conversations are going to be so much more interesting a year from now when teams will have the option to maybe send one guy to the American League. And with a guy like Martin, the conversation would be like, okay, do we put him back to junior where he can be the best player, get 2 points a game or whatever the number is and dominate? Or do we give him pro experience in the American League? Like we're going to be entering a totally different debate 12 months from now.
It is for sure. And that's where the habits come in, right? Because it's, again, like he talked about and like you can see in junior, is you get away with a lot more in the NHL than you don't. You're really not fooling anybody. The AHL is just a complete bottleneck of players. And then it comes down to who is in your system and where the slotting is and what minutes is he going to take away from someone else that might be a prospect. So having both resources, I think, will be huge for teams to be able to move them where they best fit.
Couple of fill-in-the-blank questions before we get to our big segment today. We're going to hit both our areas of expertise. We got an Oilers question and a goaltending question, but a surprising bit of news out on Long Island, where the Islanders just 6 games into their season parted ways with their goalie coach Piero Greco. So let me give you the fill-in-the-blank. The Isles firing their goalie coach 6 games into the year is blank. Huts.
Not surprising. I feel like when you hire a goalie coach in your American League, that was your your go-to guy, Sorokin's goalie coach from the KHL, it just felt like inevitable. It felt like it was in the queue and it was ready to happen. They just needed a reason for it to go down. So that being said, I'm sure there was more thought that went into it. And I've talked to people and it sounded like this Sorokin had nothing to do with it. But in my mind, it felt like Sorokin had everything to do with it. I think the fact that he got this job and maybe they didn't go to Sorokin right in this moment to be like, hey, Sorokin, like, are you ready to fire the guy? No, that doesn't happen. But to that sense, a slow start like this, they want some familiarity. And I saw this firsthand in Pittsburgh when Matt Murray became the guy and Mike Bales was moved on for Buckley because Buckley was Matt Murray's guy. There is that relationship. There is that happiness of trying to keep your guy. Not necessarily that the goalie has the impact on it, but just knowing they have that relationship and rapport with someone they've had success, it's quicker to make this move. So it's not surprising because of the struggles of Sorokin. But again, there's a lot of hockey left, and he's a veteran guy. I assume his game will come back around here.
I like the way you put that. Like, yeah, like Ilya Sorokin didn't walk into, Patrick Waugh's office and be like, I'm sick of this guy. He's the reason I can't make a No, but at the same time, you're sitting here and I just pulled up the numbers. I know save percentage is a very, very surface level stat, but of the 21 goalies in the NHL this season who have played 5 or more games, Ilya Sorokin is 20th of those 21 in save percentage. The only one who's been worse so far this year is actually Linus Ullmark. So the struggles are notable. Like, yeah, he didn't walk in and ask for him to be fired, but come on, are they making this change if Ilya Sorokin has a 9-10 right now? Probably not.
Yeah, no chance, right? And again, and it's tied to it. And you could also make the argument, you look at the way they defend, they give up a lot of inner slot shots and they haven't been good enough. But when you have a goaltender that is an upper echelon guy, he has to be a difference maker every night. That's why you pay him all this money. And I remember having this conversation with a goalie coach when I played in Nashville as the backup. They were like, hey, if you go 500, you did your job. The guy making 7, 8, 9, $10 million, he's paid to be a difference maker every night. And he hasn't been that difference maker. So I think they're trying to give him a burst of energy, a little shot in the arm to get him going. But that being said, I think just overall, they need to be better defensively as a team.
All right, next one, we got 12 games on tap tonight in the NHL. A couple of really, really good matchups, too. You got the 5-1 Hurricanes taking on an Avalanche team that has not lost in regulation yet this season. But another late one tonight is in my backyard in Edmonton, where the Oilers are somehow minus 240 favorites against the 6-2 Montreal Canadiens. And all of this comes, and the Oilers, will call it mild start to the season at 3-3-1. Their offense at 5-on-5 is 30th in the NHL. There is blank reason to be concerned about the Oilers' offense, Huts.
Again, I guess I'm just so used to the slow starts. This doesn't even get my pulse going at all here, Ty. I know you guys are, other than we chatted about Connor Brown scoring so many goals for the Devils where he couldn't do that in Edmonton. But this is a team that just has the experience and they have the high-powered offense. They have everything it takes to be a good team in the future. They're setting the table, right? So my only concern for them is just finding the structure and finding where is that secondary scoring going to come from. Because at the end of the day, we know Connor, we know Draisaitl, we know we're going to get those points when we need them. And those are guys that have been proven performers when it matters most. Now it's the tinkering in this lineup. Now it is, okay, what are the additions we're going to need to push our team over the top in a Western Conference that's absolutely loaded? It doesn't look like Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado, all these teams are taking a step back in the Central. And then you look at the Pacific, obviously what's Vegas been able to do? LA's hasn't been unbelievable by any means, but Vegas is a team that is worrisome because they do generate a lot of offense. So it's more that secondary scoring for me that, kind of lights the lamp a little bit here, Ty.
All right, let's get going into our big segment as we welcome in Steve Peters. He is brought to you by our friends at Uber Eats. Uber Eats is enabling fans to maximize their fandom all season long with exclusive game day deals on the app. From game day eats to paper plates and napkins if you're hosting, to all the ingredients you need to make your favorite game day dip. Before, during, and after the game, Uber Eats is assisting every fan's hockey experience all season long. Always a pleasure to welcome Steve Peters into the show from ESPN and Inside the Coaches Room. Petey, we're talking coaches today. A handful of, guys who are taking over a bench, some of them for the first time in their coaching careers taking over an NHL bench, and the results have been a little mixed baggish, but I want to start with one guy, and it's Dan Muse out in Pittsburgh. He was maybe the most surprising hire of the bunch this offseason, and so far he's arguably been giving the most surprising results.
Yeah, he's a guy that when you look at, the new coaches coming into the league this season, he's a guy that you look at his resume and you go, he's been on NHL benches for years, but he's predominantly, worked with younger players. He worked the USNDP for years and had a lot of success with young players and working with young players. So you give him to the Pittsburgh Penguins, one of the oldest teams in the league with Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Carlson, and go, good luck, buddy. But honestly, the Pittsburgh Penguins have done extremely well in almost all metrics. They've increased goals for. They've gone down in goals against. Their power play is better. Their scoring is up. And this is a team that, when you look at their record last year, they got 6 points. I know, 6 points through 7 games. Now they have 10. And it's a team that I thought was regressing, and they've done much better under Dan Muse. It's been one of the bigger surprises for the new coaching staffs across the league.
For me, I'm going to jump to a newer coach, right? Marco Sturm. He hasn't done well as of late in Boston, but again, he's a guy that isn't one of these recycled coaches. They're giving him a chance, but they also don't really have a plethora of players for him to work with. What are the expectations of him in Boston here with the squad and what he has?
Yeah, I think this is tough. It's a tough spot for Marco Sturm. He's a guy that knows the organization. The organization trusts him and really likes him. I don't think playoffs are the expectations for this Boston Bruins team right now. I think they're going to give him an opportunity to work and get this team going better. They did start hot, and you looked at Pasternak's one of the guys you need to get on the score sheet, and he's been better offensively than he finished the season last year. He is going to be the guy that drives the offense, and he seems to be working well with Marco Sturm. But Marco Sturm's getting this Boston Bruin team back to Bruin identity. They're really good along the walls. They're a lot more physical. They're third in hits per 60 right now in the NHL. So they're trying to become that big bad Bruins that they used to be. It's just going to take time. They don't have that plethora of young skill that they're trying to get back up and into the roster. He's going to have a tough time. They're 28th in goals for last year. They've moved up to 16th, so they're creating more offense. It's something they really wanted to do there. But one thing, when you watch him coach, this team is trying to defend better, and their defense are backing out of the zone and defending the rush versus trying to hold that blue line. You see so many teams like Florida and Carolina holding the blue and being very aggressive on that gap. Look for Boston to back off. We're going to defend you better. We're not going to give up those big rush plays. And I think that's one of the things that Marco Sturm is trying to incorporate into this Bruin team.
Okay, PD. So now I got to go to the other end of the spectrum. Joel Quenneville, the old dog, right? He's back now. And again, I guess I'm like I kind of came in this league at a weird time, right? Where I played with like the old school guys where this is the way. And then I played with the new age guys. I was kind of sandwiched in between. What's the adjustment like for a guy like Joel Quenneville with this younger age of player and the talent? And, obviously a guy who's a legend, but he's in a new era now.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge for him. And you look at the time that he was away from the game, coaches have changed. Coaches have changed on how you coach players today, and it's a much, much, much different league than when he was successful in Chicago. It is now, you pat the guys on the back league. It's a, hey, hug your buddy league. Like, you've got to give these young players a little different care and attention than they got 10 years ago. Back then, rookies were rookies, and you were treated like rookies, and coaches were in charge. The dynamic has changed. So to see Joel Quenneville having success with a team that is primarily driven by young talent and young players, to see the way they've responded to him is fantastic. But you talk about what they're coming from, and I'm not here to disparage coaching staff, but Greg Cronin is tough to play for. He was a guy that was very demanding. He was a black and white coach that this is the way we're going to play. He was tough to play for, and that can be a struggle for young players. That can be something they're not used to, being pushed in that particular way. So I think this has been a breath of fresh air getting Joel Quenneville in there, and I do think this team is playing much better under him. They're more structured. They're more disciplined. And you know what? It looks like they're having fun. And I think that is the key to success with a team that has young players, to make the arena a fun place to go to.
I want to kind of follow up on that a little bit, because, we laughed when we did our awards previews this year that, like, does the Jack Adams Award really ever go to the best coach in the NHL? No, it goes to the coach and team who's just the most surprising and has the best storyline. So when you could, and if you want to flash up that board again, when you kind of sit here and look and like, okay, the Stars under Gulletson are off to a better start than they were a year ago, or sorry, the reverse. They're off to a slightly worse start than they were a year ago. But a guy like Blash, okay, the Hawks are looking good. Like, and I'm hoping I'm framing this in a coherent way, but is there a coach whose fingerprints are kind of all over the improvements versus maybe some of these coaches who, like, hey, they just happen to be behind the bench and the team's playing a little bit better than they were 12 months ago? Like, does that make sense?
It does, and I think where we have to go to on the teams with new coaches, there's a couple things. One, I think the Philadelphia Flyers and the Chicago Blackhawks are the two teams that I think their coach has had the biggest influence on changing the structure / culture of what's going on in those cities. The Chicago Blackhawks, you look, and they ended up with Sorensen behind the bench to end the season, and everybody knew he was a lame duck coach and he was on his way out. I don't know if that was the perfect way to start building that culture. Blashill comes from Tampa Bay, where he's been for several years now, and I think he's been able to instill this we're all in this together mentality. And you see the Chicago Blackhawk team really, really coming together now. And I think they understand this is the coach. This is the way we're going to play. We're going to defend as well as we can, but we are going to use our team speed to play the other side of the ice. So I think Blashill has really put his identity on this team in Chicago. And when you look at Rick Tocchet and what they've done in Philadelphia, I know the record isn't like they're way ahead of where they were a year ago, but I think over time, this team, you're starting to see these players play a little bit more free. And under John Tortorella, I really like John Tortorella, by the way. I think he's an outstanding coach, but Tocchet's approach to this team is a little different. Tocchet is a one-on-one coach. He wants to spend more time with players and help them get to their best, and it's through positivity. And I think you've seen it in Trevor Zegras' game. I think he's starting to play better. Michkov will come along, I think, but you're seeing guys like Noah Cates and Bobby Brink are playing so much better in Philadelphia. I think those two teams, although I don't think either one's a playoff team this year, I do think you're seeing these coaching staffs help these teams be better and take steps forward through their rebuilds.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead.
I guess the only thing I wanted to, I guess where I go with it, my head goes with this, and I think of the Toronto Maple Leafs. How long does it take for you, like when you're breaking down video and a new coach is in there, PD, how long do you start to see the actual system change, right? Because training camp is so fast. There's no time to practice. Like, what is the sample size for us to really give these coaches leashes to like transform a team into a different system?
I think you're seeing that across the league with some of these coaches right now, especially you look at Dallas and a team that's really struggling defensively. It's a team that's had a coach for a long period of time that are veteran players that are playing a certain way. And to change a system from a man-on-man to a zone defense, for example, it's hard. And the more veteran the player, the harder it is to break those habits. And I think that's what you're seeing in Dallas. It does take time. And I remember when Rick Tocchet came to the Arizona Coyotes, we lost 11 straight. And the problem with what Rick Tocchet was trying to do, he was literally trying to change every system all at once. And so the players were overwhelmed and they just couldn't play. They were too much thinking. They couldn't react. So after game 11, it was okay, we're going to work on one thing today. This is it. We're going to fix our neutral zone. That's it. We're going to let everything else go. We're working on one thing at a time. So I do think you're going to see some of these teams. It's going to take time. And Dallas and the New York Rangers are two big examples of guys that have veteran teams, veteran groups that are taking a little bit longer to get into their structure and learn their system. So I do think you're going to see that by the 20 game mark. It should be second nature and should be habit, but it's going to take a couple more weeks.
And that ties into a question we got in our chat from NY Boost. We have a lot of Rangers fans who obviously watch the show, and he wanted to know, like, how long will it take Mike Sullivan to get this Rangers team fully bought in and playing up to their talent level? And I guess that's, again, an interesting way to kind of look at it here. Oh, maybe they're a Devils fan.
Yeah.
Actually. I read the profile picture wrong. Whoops.
It's funny, but the New York Rangers problems, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think they stemmed from coaching problems a year ago with Peter Laviolette. We talked about the disruption they had in the locker room with the general manager sending out memos, and everybody kind of blew up the room. That's tough to recover from. Mike Sullivan's a great coach. And right now, this is a roster that you go, okay, where are the New York Rangers going? They do have some top-end talent. But right now, this is a team that needs secondary scoring, needs to have some more balance through their lineup, but they're just not scoring. Like, they're playing pretty well. Goals 4, 5-on-5, they're last in expected goals. I mean, puck's not going in. 31st in shooting percentage. The puck's not going in. And you look at the high danger shot for in the league, they're second. Like, they're getting the opportunities, they're just not going in. So when you look at Mike Sullivan, what have they done? Well, their goals against is down. Their goaltender's playing as well as he possibly can play. They're generating more offensive opportunities. They're just not going in. That's not sustainable over time. The puck's going to go in. This Ranger team is going to be better. But for Rangers fans out there, don't be too excited because this roster is still flawed. I think there are still some concerns inside the room on what this team is going to be long-term, but it's not going to be because of their coach. I think those puck is going to start going in, and I do think this team is going to start to climb in the standings.
All right, Petey, appreciate your time as always. Thanks for popping on, and we'll chat again next week.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
NY Boost. Not happy I called them a Rangers fan. I mean, between the name and you asking a Rangers question, that's a leap that I can naturally take, but I do apologize. We'll get to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag askdfo. We got one in here that I don't know if you'll have a great answer for it, Hut, obviously, because you were a player and I'm a fan, but they asked, hashtag askdfo, since you both enjoyed the Jays winning together in person, which hockey moment have you been at that is equivalent to the Springer Dinger? So obviously, I've had a lot of really good Oilers experiences over the last couple of years. I think if I'm going recent, this last year when Edmonton is down 2-0 to the LA Kings, they are down by 2 goals in their game against the Kings in game 3. And there was the goalie interference call on Evander Kane where it went the Oilers' way. They cut the lead down, tied the game. And then a couple of seconds later, it was bing, boom, Evan Bouchard to Draisaitl back of the net. And that building went from like everyone was slouched over in their seats being like, damn, we're about to go down 3-0 to the LA Kings to like 3 minutes later, pandemonium, one of the loudest buildings I've ever been in. So to me, that compares to the Springer one because Hut's like, as we were sitting there and they're down 3-1, you could hear a pin drop inside the Rogers Center.
It was like the nervous energy in that building. And, it almost like you wanted everyone to get into it and they found a way to do it. So obviously a trickier question. Like I'm trying to detach myself from playing in the moment. But when I was a black ace for the Chicago Blackhawks, 2013, I'm in Boston sitting in the press box with all the brass. It's me and 3 other players as black aces. And that was when they tied the game late. It was Brian Bickle. And then David Bolin scores the eventual cup winning goal as a fan, I guess, because we were going nuts. So that was probably the best experience I've had at a hockey game as almost a fan. Like I was on the team, but I wasn't on the team. If you get my drift there, I was just cheering the Hawks on. So that was a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was absolutely insane. Because reverse. Because that was in Boston.
In Boston, yes. And we were minutes away from getting on the plane to head back to Chicago for a game 7. And then all of a sudden it's flipped right away. And next thing you know, we're running down to the Stanley Cups on the ice and it's over.
Yeah, that is a good one. That was a wild end to a Stanley Cup final. The Hawks had a tendency to win in dramatic fashion when you think of that one, and then the Kane goal before that. Let's get to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Hutz and I off yesterday, but Pat, you took full advantage of being the only one in attendance, and you got yourself a win.
Yeah, luckily I got on the board. I had Canadiens, Calgary under, and I don't normally bet the under, but I thought Dustin Wolf was playing well and Calgary can't score, so I just figured it was a pretty safe one. These are from the other day though, so this is from, what would that have been? What day is it today? Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm the only one that nailed this. I had my Matthew Nyes shot prop, a nice juicy plus 160. That puts me nice and comfortably in the lead as well. So you boys got to start to figure it out here as we head towards the end of October. But let's go to our picks for tonight. Hutz, what do you like?
Tonight, I'm going with the team on a back-to-back here. They're playing the Detroit Red Wings, just dropped their game last night against the Buffalo Sabres, and now they're playing the New York Islanders out in the island. Cam Talbot's back in the pipes. They're underdogs. So I'm taking the Detroit Red Wings over the New York Islanders tonight on a back-to-back.
I totally messed with you on the order there, Pat. That's my bad. That's just horrible host to producer play. That's a suicide pass in our industry. I'm going Ilya Mikheyev and Matthew Schaefer, 2+ shots parlayed together at plus 153. Schaefer has hit in 4 of 5. And in a couple of those games, he's been up at like 8 and 4. So his line being at 2+, I'm all over it. Mikheyev has hit in 5 straight games. He's gone 3 or more shots in 3 of those 5 as well. So both these guys crushing it as of late. Lines are super low. So I'm taking advantage of that. Pat, you can go third.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep it simple. Utah money line against St. Louis tonight. For some reason, they're underdogs. I get that they're away, but they're on a streak. The young kids are playing good. They're fun to watch. So, I'm going to be cheering for Utah. Either way, might as well try and get some extra points on the board with that one.
I was looking as well just at a couple of lines that don't make a ton of sense to me. You can play the Canadiens and Red Wings together. They're both road dogs, but again, early in the season, I don't mind going with a road dog. The Habs being plus 190 against the Oilers, second of back-to-backs, a little scary, I suppose, and the Red Wings being plus 115. Like, man, you can play those two together and get it like plus 520, plus 530. There's some juice there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good value too. And the Habs have Montembeault tonight. They saved them for this one.
They did, and Edmonton's going Calvin Pickard. So again, like there might be some goals on the board. I don't mind banking on Montreal's offense a little bit. Let's wrap up with our garbage time, and wanted to give some stick taps to Colton Ellis, who made his NHL debut yesterday, which also gave us the very rare, honestly, don't know if I've ever seen it, goalie rookie lap from Colton Ellis, who got to head out onto the ice in Buffalo ahead of his debut. Not only did he pick up the win, but he was obviously very emotional after the game, talking about what this meant for him. The 25-year-old Hutz played in 146 professional games before getting his chance at a debut. Pretty cool story.
Pretty cool story. Something I can relate to, that's for sure. The amount of time I spent in the minors and sitting on a bench before I got a chance to play. And one of two goalies to wear 92, Thomas Vokoun was the other one. So a pretty cool story. And catching his interview last night, I thought it was great. It's just the emotion that's tied and seeing his family, and good for him, and a great win for a team that they've got to find a way to get a spark right now, and he did it.
Yeah, he did. Okay, so I said he played 146 games before making his NHL debut. How many American League and ECHL games did you play, Carter Hutton? I have the answer, but I'm quizzing you.
Do you? I know this is tough. I don't know. I want to say I was somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe I got to be really close to that. So maybe I'll say I was over, maybe in the 150s, maybe, or one. I don't know. This is tough, Ty. You got me on the spot here.
Slightly under. You were 134. But again, you backed up. You spent a ton of time backing up until you finally got your NHL start. So we obviously aren't counting those. But yeah, you were 134. 134.
Yeah, I was telling you that story earlier. I think it's a great one. I remember doing an interview when I was in Chicago before my start, and he said, the guy interviewing me, the media guy, told me that I had the most games backed up in the NHL without ever playing a single minute. And I was like, wow, that stings a little bit here, buddy. Close enough to get there, just not good enough to go on the ice.
All right, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Big shout out to our guy, Petey, for giving us some time. As always, everybody in the YouTube chat, you were tremendous as usual. Have a good Thursday. Enjoy a loaded 12-game slate in the NHL, and we'll be right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.